Reading from the Gospel according to Matthew. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." The word of the Lord. Understanding a little bit of the context of Matthew 22 here is important because otherwise it seems like a fairly simple representation of the golden rule: love your neighbor as yourself and love your God. Jesus isn't saying anything here to this lawyer that's talking to him that the lawyer wouldn't have already thought Jesus would know the right answer to. So what's going on here? I think part of what's important to understand is at this point in Matthew 22, it's safe to say that the crowd that's testing Jesus here has pretty much already made up their minds that they're going to do away with Jesus. It's a predetermined conclusion at this point, and they're just looking for some sort of pretext to do it. And so you've got the Sadducees are testing him, throwing questions his way. The Herodians are, the Pharisees are, quizzing him about things like marriage and the resurrection and currency, like coins. And in all of this, they're putting Jesus to a test to try to catch him in something. And here he is in the temple. No matter what attacks and traps they're throwing his way, he's rebuffing them. And he gets to this point where he's saying you should love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I think what's safe to say here is that all of the people in this crowd already know that that's the rule. And yet, even though they know that that's the law, and even though they know that's the right answer, they're not following it. They're not loving their neighbor as themselves. If they've already pre-decided that he's guilty and are just trying to trap him and find a way to do him in. Now, I think about this in our world today, and it's fascinating and I'll admit somewhat horrifying to me to hear people using the phrase "love your neighbor as yourself" as a way in which to withhold love from people on the pretext of saying, well, that person isn't my neighbor. And I've heard this again and again on the news right now about people being able to turn their backs on those in need around them, and simply by doing so, by saying, oh, I'm being called to love my neighbor as myself. This person's not my neighbor. And it seems like that same kind of predetermined legalistic argument that I hear that the crowds in the temple are trying to trap Jesus with here. And that I think the focus in that element is on the wrong part if you're focusing on who is my neighbor as a way to try to determine who you don't have to love. But the whole point is as yourself. That's the part they're missing out on, is the as yourself. It doesn't actually matter in this argument who your neighbor is, if what you're looking at is the perspective of how do I want to be loved. That's where the focus is. Or at least I would say that's how Jesus is having the focus be. Ask yourself, how do I want to be loved? Not who is my neighbor and who isn't my neighbor. And if I'm asking myself, how do I want to be loved? I want human dignity. I want people to care what I think. I want people to care how I feel. When I'm hurt, I want it to stop. When I'm happy, I want to be able to enjoy that happiness. I want simple comforts to be safe, to be fed. I know the things that help me feel loved. And if I know the things that help me feel loved, then I know how I should be treating people around me. And it really doesn't matter in that case who counts as my neighbor and who doesn't count as my neighbor, because I'm not being asked to determine who is my neighbor and who isn't my neighbor. I'm being asked to love as I want to be loved. And in that way, it's turning away from the kind of legalistic argument, trying to find a loophole that I hear the crowd in the temple trying to trap Jesus in here. And I hope we can get to the point in our society today where we can stop trying to look for the loophole ourselves and start trying to look at loving others as I know and I think you probably know you want to be loved as well. Thanks be to God. Amen.